students of Reddit, what is something your teacher did that really pissed the whole class? Oh, this one's a favorite point post English class. Break starts, I remain at my desk and do the homework the teacher assigned. Break ends, teacher comes back, sees I've done the homework already. She waits for all the class to come back, then she shouts, since Emeril 1391 has already done the homework, you all get 2 extra pages. Needless to say, that didn't improve my bullying situation. Edit. Wow, this somehow got more attention than I thought it would. So for clarification, it was middle school in Italy. I was 12 at the time. It definitely was not a lot of homework. Don't remember how much, but probably around 5 pages of English grammar exercises. Fill in the gaps, turn adjective into adverb, etc. So it was easy homework. Most pupils who like the subject would be able to do it in a 15 minutes breakpoint. Reasons. To this day, I have no clue. But teachers and pupils bullied me terribly in that school. I do remember my parents telling me she was probably bitter because I could speak and understand English better than her. Could have been the case, could have not, I don't remember, but she surely didn't like me. Yelled at me for no reason, called me stupid, laughed when other kids bullied me, or actually got mad at me. When I got bullied, it means you did something to piss them off. It's safe to say that this wasn't an actual thought-through pedagogic decision gone wrong. I had a CS teacher like that. I literally fell asleep a couple times in his class. I only know that it was all about his golden child daughter and dastardly useless son, because some other people apparently listened to his inane ramblings and told me point. Although I did find out that the class didn't hate it the one time I got pissed off and asked him to actually teach the subject. 2 of my fellow students told me that was shitty because they were worried we might actually have to do something in that class I didn't care. That imbecile shouldn't have been teaching students, at least not in a subject he clearly knew nothing about. He also blatantly graded people on how much he liked them, giving the daughter of an old school friend an A, which she found funny because she did absolutely nothing, and telling me that he almost got me down to a C, but would magnanimously leave the decision on whether to give me a B to the other CS teacher who graded our final assignment. It ended up a B. Unsurprisingly, a couple years later I heard he got transferred to a different school after they caught him jacking off to porn on the CS Lab Beamer. This was back when Beamers were too expensive for private households. Math teacher, GCSE year teacher gave us a piece of coursework that we had a month to do. We weren't the brightest bunnies at math in that particular class, just under average, but somehow every single student in that class decided we were going to go above and beyond to try and up our grade. We collectively pulled together and worked our ass off, some of us going without sleep at times, so we could work on it and provide help to the others, myself included. When we handed in our coursework there was a pretty good feeling in the class. We thought we had done well and were pleased with ourselves. When we got our papers back we all got higher grades than usual, and in many cases, did even better than we hoped, myself included. Then teacher informed us that the coursework was only mock and didn't count for anything. We now had to do the real coursework in the span of 2 weeks. There wasn't a riot. Everyone just went quiet. We were collectively stunned in disbelief. No one said anything at all. We simply couldn't believe it. Over the next 2 weeks I was pretty much crying every night. I'd burned myself out over the mock and was just too tired. I had also been recently diagnosed with CFS, which didn't help my concentration or mood at all. I wasn't the only one either. Everyone else was having issues and all the camaraderie we had built up over the month previous just dissolved. Handed in my coursework after the fortnight was up and then went and cried in the girls' toilets because I knew it was awful, especially compared to the mock I had been so proud of. The results from that were nearly all below our usual grades. I just about scrapped my old average. Teacher then rubbed salt in the wound by saying she was disappointed in all of us. No one had the energy to argue. We just took it. I think one person tried complaining to the head teacher afterwards, but nothing came of it. For extra injury, that teacher had several maths classes, but we were the only one she pulled that stunt on. Oh, I've had so many. First teacher was new to the school and taught us science in year 10th. She was always 20 minutes late to class, She was a fun teacher, but our lessons were only 40 minutes, so we'd literally waste half a lesson being late. Pissed me off no end. Another teacher lost 2 years worth of my science coursework which I had to redo by the end of the week. That was 3 days. I'm surprised I got the grade I did, and she didn't help. And finally the doctor. This one makes me laugh. I don't know how the rest of you address your teachers, but here in England it's common to call them Miss and Sir, but not the latest science teacher in year 10th. Oh no, you had to address her as doctor, followed by her name which was incredibly close to a well-known vegetable which we took advantage of, and if you didn't she wouldn't answer, or even acknowledge you. She asked if she could hit us, asked our parents if she could smack us upside the head, belittled us because we were public school kids from rough areas. This was all within the week. Needless to say, we made her time hell, and she ran out of the school crying, leaving all her belongings, except her handbag by Tuesday the following week. We didn't see her again. And every substitute ever who thought they were God when they walked into the room. So I just finished my high school, so soon I should go to university. But during my 4th year of high school my class had this new German teacher who was totally unbearable. She kept shouting at everyone and giving bad notes too without any proper reason. Once we had this test where only 2 people got at least 6+ and all the others were insufficient, so everyone was already mad at her. But then she did the worst thing she could have possibly done. I took in my test a honest 4, not too good in German. My fault, although I tried to do my best nonetheless. Yet she calls me in front of everyone and she just says that I'm retarded in the language because even if I study I'm a failure. Useless to say that everyone got pissed off at her, as we were a very supportive class, and started reporting her to the principal and started boycotting her lessons as well. From what I've heard these things happened also in other classes, and she in fact didn't get to renew the contract the later year thankfully, but because of her I stopped having interest in German, a language I studied for 7 years, and other had the same effect. But now I've got that interest back thanks to another good and supportive teacher. Moral of the story: bad teachers can really destroy the interest of one student into a subject. Not my professor, but a friend of mine. His professor was going through some rough marital issues and this started to reflect in his teaching, or their lack of. He'd be late almost every day for the first half of the semester. Then there are days that he doesn't show up to teach and never bothered to inform the students. When he's able to inform the students of his absence, it's only a few minutes before class start. Again, imagine this happening constantly for the first half of the semester, or close to that. Soon word got back to the higher ups, and he was promptly fired. The only problem? He didn't know he was fired and showed up to class. Imagine walking in 15 minutes late and seeing another professor standing there, telling your student what's going to happen with the remainder of the semester. Well, he stayed there for about 10 minutes before making a quiet exit. The new professor, from what I heard, got most of the animosity because the students didn't want to readjust in order to fit his design for the class. From what I have heard, it was pretty simple stuff. Forget the old syllabus and use his, which mentions doing some new simple assignments. Don't stress about the stuff you haven't done yet, and anything you have done already for the old professor will be counted towards your grade point. Some student was still angered by this, but only one student got physically upset because he had done all of the assignments already. Just goes to show you can't please everyone. Edit, marital, not Marshall's dead it too. The student was told repeatedly that he, new professor, will take all works, including that ones he did, into consideration. The only difference was that he might count them as something less, like an extra credit assignment or quiz grade point. This was what upset the student, as he wanted full credit for his work, regardless of what the other students felt. The entire class was now upset with him as he kept lecturing/complaining about this. They haven't started on this assignment yet, from what I'm told. I'm glad I get to tell this story. In high school I had a teacher for pre-calc we'll call Dr. B. She was the worst experience I've ever had with an educator, bar none. To this day, I still hate having taken that class. As a sophomore, I had never actually had a teacher who was credentialed to the point of having a doctorate. The only doctors I really knew about were medical doctors. So when I started this class, I often called her Ms. B instead of Dr. B. Every time I used the wrong title when trying to speak with her caused her to ignore me completely. And not just me, but any student who did the same. As you can imagine, most kids had this problem initially. This led to an increasingly frustrating classroom environment, to the point where no one liked her and only spoke if they absolutely had to. I tried to get better at using the proper title, but I would occasionally make a mistake. Everyone hated dealing with her, and some kids would do it on purpose just to annoy her. One day I had to use the restroom and I raised my hand to get her attention. She didn't see me at first, so I called her name, Ms. B. Can I use the restroom? This bitch looked me dead in the eye, and then turned back to what she was doing, completely ignoring me. I was so goddamn angry I walked out, and went to the restroom anyway. When I came back she tried to write me up for leaving class. I just took the referral, and tore it up looking her dead in the eye. We had a bit of a standoff, you might say. A couple of my buddies were fighting to keep from laughing, because I was never the rebellious type, so this was a treat for them. She let it go, so I figured that was that. When I got home, my mother asked me what happened. It turns out she called my mom about my discipline problem and said that would have to accept a referral the following day. I told my mom what happened, and thankfully she understood. Most of my teachers loved me, and I never had problems, so this was not a normal situation. She said she'd take care of it. The next day I get called down to the office after first period, and when I arrive my mom is there with Dr. B, the principal, and a couple of other administrators. She then proceeds to go into crazy mom mode and basically tells them that any referrals written by this teacher would be ignored, and she would not force me into any kind of in-school or out-of-school detentions. It was one of my favorite mom moments. All I could think was hell yeah. Things got a little better in class after that, but I still hated her and was happy when the year was over. TLDR, Dr. B was a B. Our Slovenian language teacher in middle school was from a different region of the country than us. For reference, Slovenian is a ridiculously hard language even for us native speakers, and it does not help that it's also incredibly fragmented by dialects, both minor ones spoken only in a few places and major regional ones, and it's practically impossible to speak the same formal language written in the books. It sounds incredibly stiff. Then there's the issue with phonemic, sing-song pronunciation, and non-phonemic, harsher, choppy sounding, accent. They are both considered correct, however, and here's our problem. We are from the region next to the border with Austria, and German had a lot of influence on everyday language here. We use non-phonemic pronunciation, and have serious issues with phonemic. We simply cannot talk that way. Our teacher was from the region where they used phonemic pronunciation, and she was adamant how our pronunciation is incorrect and utterly inferior compared to hers, in a really insulting way, and we spoke perfectly normal, semi-formal everyday Slovenian used practically everywhere. She went on and on and on about this in every lesson point, so we refused to even try learning the phonemic way. It wasn't even a part of the lessons, it was just her pet peeve with us. And a few of the kids in class were from places where they still speak those almost impossible to understand dialects, so they only spoke in those to her. Our little linguistic rebellion was glorious, and she couldn't do a single thing to stop it. It was third year economics at university, and we were in a tutorial where a few of us were given topics a week or so ago to prepare and then present in front of the class. Now this teacher was pretty weird. He was the kind that signed off emails to his class as your friend and tried to make jokes in class to make us like him. To be fair, I found him hilarious, and he actually used real money to explain economic theory which we could keep if we won at his game. Anyway, each person had to present their topic, and at the end we were all given a peer-to-peer feedback sheet where he made us rate each presenter and add pro and cons comments about them. I had seen peer-to-peer reviews before where you wrote comments, but I found it quite strange that we had to rate our peers out of 10. My theory was that he wanted to use our grading system to then decide final marks for the presentations as he was busy slaying creatures in Azeroth on his iPad. What really made the class tick was when he then asked us to go around individually and read our ratings and comments out loud to the class. We then all got up and protested like it was a riot. That was not cool, Urgent. Not cool. The tale of Captain Cameltoe. This woman was an utter delight. She was skinny as fuck with a mop of black hair that reminded you of these weird flat Sahara trees, and, as far as theories went, probably slept in a solarium like some sort of dependent sanity vampire. I had to deal with this woman for 4 years of my life, from age 12 to 16, and it was utterly exhausting. Her personality was something like the unholy love child between cancer and the bubonic plague, and, while she did not have a single big fuck up that earned her our, and everybody else's other students, teachers, and parents included, it was kinda a continued level of being utterly faking shit in everything, that climaxed in a rather sweet and amusing event, that didn't make anything better for anyone. She was our class teacher, which led to higher grade students giving us a pass in the pecking order, because even bullies had at least some empathy and school was already hell enough for us. Her topics were German, mother language, and entitled everything from literature to learning how to spell, which was the first point. She couldn't spell sheet. This woman who somehow ended up in the teacher's chair made a fuck ton of mistakes. While not a shiny for the job, we could have lived with it if she hadn't insisted constantly that she was right and everyone was wrong. It was a faking battle to hammer it into her head when she pulled a stylized interpretation of some word out of her scrawny ass, and even then she would continue to mumble about old spelling, changed since she was in school, yada yada. She also made spelling 33% of your grade in each test, and, if you made the same mistake twice, it would also count as 2 mistakes. See the problem? Then she had this hard-on, pardoned, fat fleshy camel toe for extensively going over tests, and you, as a student, were supposed to correct your mistakes and present the corrected questions the next day, which she would then grade again. So everybody just sat there and copied exactly what she wrote on the chalkboard. Next day, you all copied your homework. You also get an F. Do it again. So, the great paraphrasing began. Not that it helped much, because even if you copied the answer she gave you 1 day prior, just rephrase to avoid getting accused of copying your homework /test/ whatever the fuck that was, you still had a 50/50 chance of your answer being wrong, and your follow-up grade nosediving. Because of this, plus having to rephrase that sheet again. She got in a fight with our parents naturally, and soon also with other teachers who were sympathetic to our cause / hated her faking face. This, naturally, went nowhere because she was faking married to the guy in charge of the school district or some such. I'm fuzzy on the details, but for some reason the school couldn't do shit about it, and Captain Cameltoe remained doing her dumb shit. Then came summer and we noticed another delightful feature of this horror of a person, a foul with like a cherry on the sheet flavored ice cream, so to speak. She did not believe in deodorant and would, allegedly, call out people out in a full-blown feminist tantrum when someone told her, "Beach, you stink." So whenever the temperature climbed, the first few rows would try to move backwards as far as possible. Whenever she stalked the classroom, a Loyola wave of gagging would follow her. When she bowed down over your shoulder and her reeking suit brushed against your skin, tears would follow. Got, like a fisheye the sun, this disaster went on for years, until it climaxed in the Great War of Sheet. We had that Spanish chick. She was fat, smelled equally bad, and had a voice that would make you long for a knife being scratched across a plate. We named her Blubber in honor of her spirit animal. Now, Blubber was not well liked. She drew hentai with tentacles in school, was obnoxious and all around a pain to be in the same zip code with. But, she was really good at drawing when it wasn't Sailor Moon being wrapped by an octopus. One day, after another one of Captain Cameltoe's fuck-ups, Blubber decided it was a great idea to create some art. She got all the colored chalk she could scrounge up and went to work. The picture was dubbed Cameltoe's End and showed the hack butchered, tortured, and shoved through a meat grinder. We all had a good laugh and went on with our day until CC came. Now, we had this blackboard with wings where you could basically double the thing by pulling out the wings. Everyone settled in, and then a general nervousness spread as the first of us realized that no one had removed Cameltoe's End from the blackboard. It took her, like, 5 minutes to open the wings and get a visual representation of our feelings towards her. Holy fuck nuggets, did she explode? Now, under normal circumstances no one would have ratted Blubber out. No one gave 2 sheets, but CC must have watched some Sherlock Holmes the night before, cause she just turned and unloaded on Blubber like a furious sheet harpy, which in turn caused the fat girl to cry and confess everything. She then rounded on us how we could just sit by while someone drew something so horrible, to which we collectively shrugged. Nothing too bad, considering the circumstances, happened to Blubber. Life went on, albeit more spiteful, until after winter break in our last year we were informed that CC had been skiing and shattered her leg in an accident, and we'd get a new teacher for the remaining time, which prompted us to utterly lose our sheet and cheer, as if we had all just won the lottery. The principal who gave us the news was like, yeah, okay, and just awkwardly left us to our celebration. There are 2 that come to mind. Thermodynamics professor on the last day of the trimester before exams. Since too many of you have A's in my class, I'm going to give everyone in the top 25% A, top 50% get B, 75% get C's, and everyone else D's. We actually thought he was a great professor and we learned so much. I was one of the students with a 93 in the class, which should have given me an A, which is a 4.0 on my GPA. I got a B, which is a 2.7. That is the one grade that kept me from Dean's List that year. Biology teacher in Quaker High School. Nonviolence never solves anything. For context, you have to understand that Quakers believe in activism and nonviolence. Those are like fundamental principles of being a Quaker. The civil rights movement leader, Bayard Rustin, was a Quaker. She was telling us all about how a national protest we were going to in DC was pointless because nonviolence never solves anything. Our valedictorian very pointedly asked, well, what about the civil rights movement? And our cross-chilled teacher gave us all detention for talking back. We fought the detention with the headmaster, who gets a hard-on when it comes to non-violent protest. He's like the ultimate Quaker lol, and our detention is cancelled. That was the last time we discussed anything remotely non-science in that biology class. In university, our tutor didn't tell us about the extra credit / work experience shows, which was optional, and then after the first show called us all lazy and useless in an email for not scheduling it between the class, because it meant he had to do the work instead. I turned up for 2 of the shows to help, because I felt bad, but he then laid into me about not coming to the first show. So I didn't turn up again. He emailed and asked me why I didn't show up, as he didn't go in because he thought I would be there, and in his boss and the head of the department. My response: it's optional extra work that was meant for the whole class. I've done 2 days worth, which is the only time I can spare, both of which I did on short notice after your first email, which I've included screenshots of. I would love to help out more, but unfortunately I had prior commitments which couldn't be cancelled on such short notice as you've given us for this work. I'm glad I did not come to help at this show, as the extra credit opportunity was only meant to be shadowing you, not doing the work itself, and a student without you to supervise would have not been able to cope with the show. His boss emailed back thanking me for letting him know this was going on. Tutor had to go to training sessions, write a email of apology to us, and got a warning. In high school, I had an extremely rigorous and intelligent physics and chemistry teacher. She actually had a PhD and was from Azerbaijan, so she had a very disciplined, very Soviet attitude toward education and high expectations. Also, interesting stories. She taught me more about math alone than 12 years of other educators had. She was respected and feared in our school, but she honestly was a great educator. Before our physics final, she gave us several days to sit in class and study. Since it was senior year, most of the students used that time to do absolutely nothing but goof around. Some pulled up movies on their laptops, others got into groups and started talking. Normally she was a pretty strict disciplinarian, but she said nothing the whole time, which I found curious. Meanwhile, I'm actually very panicked about the physics final, because physics doesn't come naturally to me, so I'm sitting there studying in the corner. All of a sudden, after one group burst into a particularly raucous conversation, she stands up and announces that I alone will be exempt from the final, because I'm the only one using the time to study. All hell broke loose. Several students immediately protest that they've been studying, she just wasn't paying attention to them. Several other students just keep repeating that this must be a joke. Even the kids who are at the top of the class are infuriated. It devolves into this huge class argument, and meanwhile, I'm just sitting there in shock. I got along with most of my classmates just fine, and none of them were really mean to me, but there was a lot of anger. They beached for the rest of the hour, and every class after that they would demand that she change her mind. Of course she did not. This was a woman who told us stories about learning to shoot Kalashnikovs in her high school gym class. She had very little tolerance for the candy as Americans who viewed education as a burden instead of a privilege. It was so out of character for her that I actually continued to study for the exam right up until the moment she told me that I wasn't taking it. I was not her favorite student. I was not the most intelligent student in that class. But I was disciplined, and I really valued my education. I think she saw all the other kids wasting time, lost her temper, and made a snap judgment point after I graduated. I found out I became sort of famous. New kids in her classroom would whisper about the one girl who got exempted from the final. Hopefully it inspired them to shut the fuck up sometimes and read their books. Edit. I forgot the most hilarious part. At one point the future valedictorian and salutatorian of our class are both protesting her decision, and she looks up and goes with a flip of her hand, in her heavily accented voice, "Why do you protest so much? You are much better at physics than she is." To which I loudly said, "It's true. You are. I'm actually very stupid." She laughed really hard at that, and so did they. I had a super feminist professor who definitely crossed the line into misandry. She had the look, she used the vocabulary, and was super aggressive towards male students. One of those who had us pick our pronouns at the beginning of class would make sure to come crashing down on any male student who said men or those guys in a general sense, and complained non-stop about male privilege in an atmosphere where she literally had all the power. Well, one day our midterm essays came back. I'm a great essay writer when I take the time to do it, which I had. I had a few red marks on the page and got a C. I looked around and saw the girl in front of me had a page covered in red marks, and she got an A. The guy next to me got a D, and his page was better than the girl in front. Looking around, the pattern continued. Some gals, of course, did great and got an A+, which looked deserved. No male student got above a B. I grabbed a few of the tests near me and went straight to the dean's office. A few of the fellas followed, which maybe wasn't a great look. We had a great meeting where she accused me of being a sexist, that I hated her because she was a woman in power and couldn't stand that, and that she was so upset that the patriarchy would move against her in such a fashion. Jane Christ, lady, even if that all is true, which it wasn't, it doesn't excuse what you did. Criminology professor who spent weeks telling us our first test would not be open book. 3 hours before our test, which was at 8 in the morning, she sends out an email saying we are allowed a single sheet of paper. Obviously, given that she sent this out at 5 AM, most students remain unaware of this until she show up to the classroom and see 20 other frantically trying to write as much as they could on the paper. When she gets there, we ask her, essentially, what the fuck? She replies that she purposely did it because, supposedly, if she gives people a heads up that they're allowed to do it, then fewer people take advantage of that. Which is just complete and totally bullshit in every single possible way. Another thing was that she would get really mad at anyone who was on their phone or literally just whispering in the back of the class. You could sit right in front of that person and have no idea they were talking to someone, but she would notice and then spend 30 minutes, good god I wish this was an exaggeration, talking about how much of a distraction that was. Yeah, because the entire class is gonna get distracted by the guy in the corner sending a text message. /s. 2 substitute teacher stories for you. The first one was in 9th or 10th grade. A couple of years before, my father, who is the music teacher at that school, was absent for some reason. So they called in this dinosaur of a woman who made my middle school years awful. She was hateful, rude, and most importantly, she tried to tell every class she subbed for that she was an expert. So instead of the normal things like watching an educational video or worksheets, or whatever, she would spend the time lecturing us for 45 minutes anyway. My father was absent, so she was called in to sub for him. My father had laid out a video of a jazz musician special that aired on public television a handful of years ago. Well, She is a proper woman and probably grew up when jazz was Black Devil music anyway, but she played this video and freaked. They were talking about his salacious and wholly unwholesome upbringing and life. She ended up attempting to get my father fired for showing soft porn to the students. He obviously wasn't, and that burned her. So one day, when I was in 9th or 10th grade, she sees me in the lunchroom and says, "You're looking more and more like your father every year." I don't know if that's a good thing. What a back point. Second story is about the time my class got a sub fired point in app biology. There were tests practically every week. Our teacher was absent because of whatever reason, but it was the perfect time to have a test right. Surely a sub can't fuck up a test. Here's the thing. This sub was known throughout the school as a habitual and serial liar. Oh, did you know he featured in a snowboarding video with Shaun White? Did you know his parents were killed in 9/11? Did you know he is great friends with the lead singer of The Who? What about that time Leo D, what he actually called him, asked him to act in one of his upcoming movies, but he can't tell you which one, because he had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Well, we sit down to this guy at the desk holding the tests in his hands. He starts in with, "You know, I got my medical degree at university next door with no medical course, and my teacher said I was the best one in the class. I had the highest average there. To be honest, the highest was a C, because the course was so tough. But I knew the most. I looked through your test today, and I thought it was really difficult. Not even I could answer these questions. I've got the answer key right here. You want me to give you some of the answers to help you out?" We were in app biology, a completely snooty elective course. We were the smart kids who wanted to show off for college credits. We didn't want that faked up by some liar potentially faking us over. Anyway, we told him no repeatedly because he kept insisting on giving us a hand, and that no one in the university next door, that is a literal bastion of intelligent rich fuckheads, would get these right. We successfully got him off our backs, took the test, and then marched straight down to the office as a group to tell the admin what he was doing. Gone the next day. Class bell rings, kids start to get up. The bell doesn't tell you when to leave. I do all throughout HS. When teachers tried to keep us late after class, I would just stand up and leave. My usual phrase was, "I'm not going to be late to my next class," and get a detention because you're on a power trip. Having a very large campus, it was quite often I would book it when the bell rings and still barely make it to the next class on time. So if we were held up, it was a guaranteed detention for tardiness. I was sent to the office a few times for it, but never actually faced any punishment. All I had to do was lay out the logic. This teacher thinks she has the right to keep us after class, which creates a horrible domino effect. I end up being late to the next class and getting an hour detention for being tardy. Well, I was top varsity tennis, which started 1.5 hours before school, and I went straight to my job after school. So I didn't have an hour to just sit in a quiet classroom and do nothing. Not an option. Missing tennis would get me booted to varsity too, and missing work would get me fired. All for being 30 seconds late to class because of power tripping teacher. The punishment hardly matches the crime, especially considering being late wasn't my fault. One time I just straight up said to the principal, "Feel free to give me that detention, but don't expect me to attend. My obligation to this school ends at 3:30 p.m. and I won't waste an hour of my time or risk losing my job because I was 30 seconds late." Essentially, I would just make the principal realize I was an adult with responsibilities. I wasn't a carefree child like everyone else. I had bills to pay, a job to work, a resume to pad. Putting me in detention is punishing me for something that was out of my control. And the consequences were much more severe than the crime. At the end of the day, I just presented myself as an adult capable of logic and reason while demanding respect. And that pretty much worked. I can think of so many examples, but my favorite is the teacher we got fired. In college, we had a typography teacher who was an incredibly mean-spirited person. She would actively pick on students at random for arbitrary reasons. She made a girl cry and run out of class once, which is when I first started contacting the administration about getting this teacher removed. The final straw was when a student was late to class one day. Instead of asking why this girl was late, the teacher laid into her. The girl calmly explained that she was late because she'd witnessed an accident where a truck hit a bicyclist on the way to school. The cyclist had died, and the student was clearly traumatized. Instead of being a normal human being and consoling this girl who'd witnessed a horrible death, the teacher hissed, "And that's why you should wear a helmet." My classmate responded, "He was wearing a helmet. He didn't have a head anymore. The truck had turned too quickly and had decapitated the cyclist." I spearheaded the movement to get this teacher fired, and it was one of my proudest moments in college. No one is allowed to make my friends feel like shit. In college, one of my teachers pissed the whole class off after his first homework assignment, where we found out that he hadn't updated his homework and quizzes from the book from 4 years ago. One of the questions on the first homework assignment said to refer to a graph on a certain page of the book to answer the following question, but the graph wasn't on that page. First I thought that maybe it was a typo and that the graph was on a different page, so I skipped the question. Then there was another one where the information for the question wasn't on the page it was supposed to be on. I got in early to class the next day to ask about it, and so did a few other people, and he goes, "Oh, the school forces me to update the syllabus to the current edition of the book every year, but I haven't updated my quizzes and homework from the book from 4 years ago. So you all will need to go buy that book as well. We won't be using the book in the syllabus." In hindsight, we all should have went to complain to the dean and ask for refunds on our books, but I'm not sure why we didn't. We all just got pissed and then went and bought the book. At least it was only $60. Does a principal count? My school had a tradition that seniors could do special activities over Christmas, like decorate our lockers and halls, dress up as elves, and take the kindergarteners around and show them the decorations, and then deliver them to Santa. We got a senior lounge with food and furniture we could hang out in on our free time, things like that. Everyone looked forward to being a senior and getting to do these. My senior year, our much loved elderly principal retired. He was replaced with this troll of a woman whose very first proclamation was that there would be no more Christmas activities. Why? She was Jewish, and it was offensive to her. Nothing with these activities was ever religion related. It was just happy fun holiday times. Heck, we had a decent sized Jehovah Witness population, and they were allowed to participate. It was so non-religious. The entire school, teachers included, went foaming at the mouth, rage angry, and fought back. We eventually mostly got everything back, though she made us move the lounge from the lobby to a freaking balcony located behind our auditorium stage, and no one used it because it was stupid as shit place to have a lounge. She was an ass about other things as well, and by the time I graduated, absolutely everyone loathed her because she sucked the enjoyment out of everything. Fuck you, Miss Jones, you power hungry Grinch troll.